I want to bring your attention to something in this very first clip. This is going to be, probably a good half hour, because when I mean a good half hour, I mean a good half hour. The very first part of this, right, is one of the more patronizing things of a lot of patronizing things I've heard from Christopher Luxon, when he tells Anna Burns-Francis what to focus on and what not to focus on. Because of course she asks him about the $800 million gap, and he pivots to Labor bad, $170 a week increase in rent. Right. So let's get into this, shall we?
Good morning, Mr. Luxon. Your tax break for landlords has a pretty big difference in numbers, what was promised to what we see now. $800 million. How'd you get it so wrong?
Well, what we're doing here is we're making sure that life gets easier for renters across New Zealand. Under the previous government, rents went up $170 per week.
Did you see the pivot? It was like a gold-winning, ice dancer. Did you see it?
Oh, it's all about renters.
It was beautiful. The way he just...
Ooh,
100%. Well, and I'd just ask you to focus on the people that actually matter here, which is renters that are doing it tough. And what we've said very clearly is when you load on costs on landlords, whether through interest deductibility, the bright line, that has just meant that rents have gone up in this country over the last 6 years, $170 per week on average. What this is about is making sure that we restore interest deductibility. We're doing a phase.
Don't you love that look? That was like what the fuck are you talking about?
That is not what has put costs up. Costs were trending up before all of those things, because these guys, these landlords, and don't you dare say mum and dad landlords, because we know it's not fucking them. There is less supply for people to rent, and these guys know that they can jack up the price. And this has been hit. This is not a Labour problem. It is not just a national problem. They're both as fucking guilty as each other, because neither of them have been able to get a handle on the fact that there needs to be more places for people to live, but they don't want to tank people's investments. So this pivot into saying, we're just doing it for renters, doing it tough, bollocks. Just an outright fucking lie.
You think that's bollocks, mate? You wait till we get through some more of this interview.
Way, in a responsible way, and ultimately that means that puts downward pressure on rents. That's a good thing for renters across New Zealand.
A very quick swerve to $170 a week, but we still have the $800 million, and you're saying who's it going to impact? Well, it's going to impact taxpayers. There's less money coming in, so there's less money for you to dish out again. That's quite a substantial chunk. How come you got it so wrong?
No, we're making sure we've campaigned.
Yes.
Did you get that? What's the tell? Come on, chat. What's the tell? The stutter is always a tell. We know this now.
Yep.
The Elmer Fudd stutter is, there we go, the Porky Pig. Exactly right, team.
No, we're making sure we've campaigned on making sure we restore interest deductibility for landlords. Why are we doing that? Because we want to increase the supply of rental properties available to renters in New Zealand.
But you costed it at 2.1 and it's going to cost $2.9 billion. There's a huge gap. So how did you get the number wrong?
Remember last night how I said the one thing I did appreciate about Chris Bishop on Q&A was the answer to the question? Like, honestly, just reflect, not saying I liked the answers to his questions, but this is the example of what we had from National to this point, whether it's him or whether it's Nicola Willis, just literally refusing to answer the question and spew out talking points. And this is what this interview is.
What I'd say to you is that we have looked at the program, we've looked at the policy, we've looked at our economic conditions.
You would say it 2 times.
Yeah, with actually, look, Anna, I'll level with you.
We've worked out what we can afford, and what we're delivering is relief to landlords so that they can actually put downward pressure on rents. This is what this is all about. Interest deductibility. If you owned a cafe versus owning a rental property, you would actually be able to use it as a deductible, a legitimate business expense, and every other.
Anna Burns-Francis, and I'm going to spoil it, does something beautiful in this conversation, right? And I haven't heard anyone else pick it up, so all credit goes to her. The National, and I'm spoiling it because she says this later on, but I'm going to do it anyway. The National Party keep talking about any other business, interest deductibility. And Anna Burns-Francis goes, but hang on, any other business, they also pay tax on profits. There's no capital gains tax on houses. So you can't compare it to any other business when it doesn't pay tax like any other business. And I just thought, oh, you fucking genius. That is so good. So when they say any other business, it's not apples with apples, because the other businesses, when they make money, when they make capital gain, they pay tax on it. When you sell houses and you make capital gain, you do not. So
Absolutely.
It was a very, very, very good point that should be now repeated every day for the next 3 years.
That's absolutely it. That is the thing that is underpinning why our housing market is so fucking cooked.
Yeah.
Because here is, if you've got money and you want to make more money, here's a place where tax is not looking. So why would you put your money literally anywhere else? It is more risky to put it in a business. There are taxes on profit and stuff like that. You got to put it in housing. You got to buy an old house from someone. Don't build a new one. That's risky. Buy an old one that's already there.
Yep.
And so that is how we've built this absolutely fucked, crooked system that we've got, that now no politician wants to change, because the moment that people's portfolios start shrinking in value, or they see their home's estimate go down, people will lose their fucking mind and will turn into Mad Max real quick.
All right.
We created this. It's taken 40
business
years.
around the world and in New Zealand.
Sorry, 40 years.
Yeah, it's taken 40 years. When they changed the rules about tax around houses, 40 years, none of them have changed it. That's what's causing the problem.
That's what I mean. Labor takes a lot of blame for having absolute power to do whatever they want and not fixing a lot of shit. Right? Honestly, there's a lot of blame to be laid at Labor's feet.
This has added costs to landlords. As a result, they've taken rents up over $170 a week. We're caring about renters, and this is what this is doing, restoring supply of rental properties into the rental market in New Zealand.
We can debate that in just a second, but I just want to bring us back round to the initial question, which I hate to repeat, but I'm just really not hearing how the number jumped from 2.1 to 2.9 without an explanation. You were assuring us before the election these were rock solid, your economic plans. You said at 1.6 of September, Nicola and I are good with numbers and good on economics. So how do we have an $800 million difference on just one part of your tax plan?
Oh.
Well, I would dispute that very strongly. What you saw as a coalition government that's come together. No, I just dispute your numbers, to be honest with you. What I'd say to you very clearly is that we have an active National Party that both campaigns.
Beautiful again. These aren't her numbers. They're not Anna Burns-Francis's numbers. They're the numbers we've been given. They're the government's numbers. So there's a little pivot. Yeah, exactly. Frosty got it as well. There you go. See? Her numbers. No, they weren't her numbers. But he just he couldn't. Oh gosh, I'm going crazy with things. He pivot.
Campaigned on restoring interest deductibility because we know how important it is, and the great news is that we're doing it, and actually that's going to get relief to renters, and that's really important.
Can you still say your numbers are rock solid for everything that you forecast before you got into power, on the numbers that you promised and that voters were assured were rock solid? Can you still use that same phrase?
Yes, I can. And what I'd say to you is what's even better, Anna, is that we are
I wonder if there's a
also looking at a very dynamic
question here that's been missed. Like sometimes when you have to take them by the hand, like Jack Tame did on the weekend, and say, are the numbers today, what we've learnt today, are they the same as the numbers you told us about before the election? And then he has to say no. And then, because I get him to admit it first, and then he has to say no. So I'm no criticism overall, but like take them a step backwards and say, are these the numbers you gave us before the election? Blah, 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 blah. Yes. Are those the same numbers as today? He can't say yes to that. And then, like we saw with Chris Bishop, he had to finally admit that this was more beneficial for landlords, because Jack Tame just went, walk you into it. Now you have to actually admit it, basically.
Dynamic economic environment. We've inherited from a government that actually had massive cost overruns, that didn't fund school lunches, didn't fund pharmac drugs, and ended up spending a heap of money on stuff that didn't deliver. And so as those things come to light, we're facing up to those challenges too, whether it be school buildings that haven't been funded, whether it be ferry projects that have had massive cost overruns, whether it's been...
Oh, that one didn't date very well, Mr. Luxon, for the news this afternoon.
$250 million wasted on Auckland Light Rail and not a single metre of track built in 6 weeks. 6 years. Those are the things that we're also surfacing and we're having to deal with dynamically as we manage an economy that's in a pretty tough place.
So, as I said, I get the sense that they've been given instructions to blame Labor. That was one of the things. Chewie, I've got a couple more clips I want to play. One of them is a bit longer, so I want to not spend too much time debating now. But is there anything you want to say to that? To that now?
He seemed very, very sure that rents are going to get cheaper.
Yeah.
So my question to that is, when and how much?
Yeah.
Or, alternatively, really? Really?
Yeah.
Because it's never happened. Never, ever, 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 ever have you reduced costs for landlords and they have passed on those reduced costs to their tenants, because the choice that they're making there is, I could make more money by keeping the rents where they are. My costs have gone down. I'm now making more money. Why would they pass that on? Where is the incentive, or where is the stick to landlords to reduce rent? It's all by choice. They're not going to do it. They're not going to do it.
100%. And as we said last night, remember, this is the government who, when in opposition, said that that the supermarkets would not pass on the profits for 15% off fresh fruit and veggies. Now, if supermarkets aren't going to pass on the profits, why would landlords? You can't say that supermarkets won't do it, but landlords will. You know, you can't say that. You have to actually play an even hand. Second part of this conversation is really interesting. Chewie, at one stage, believe it or not, he tries to sell the idea that under Labor, there'll be some landlords that would just rather leave their houses empty than taking rent, because they'd rather not lose money and just leave their houses empty. I don't think he realizes if they leave their houses empty, they'll lose a lot more money because they haven't got any rent coming. But he does actually make that as a point. And this is the part where Anna Burns-Francis also talks about their capital gains tax and not being the same. Stop comparing it, because it's not the same. And we start off the part of the conversation that basically Anna Burns-Francis is saying there's no evidence anywhere that rents will go down.
Can we go back to your point about it, the impact it will have on rents? The idea has been sold to us that it will help with the cost of rents, that it will drive down the price of rents. There's no actual evidence of that, is there?
Well, the official advice is it will put downward pressure on rents, no doubt about it. And the reality is it's ultimately determined on the supply of rental
Why is there no
properties
doubt
available
about
in the
it?
market. It's the same thing that happens
That's actually
when
the
you
number
buy
one,
a
isn't it?
house. Well, that'll ultimately determine it. And so what we're doing is, if you're a landlord and all of a sudden you've been slugged with a policy which was to remove interest deductibility, which is insane. It doesn't happen in any other business in the world or in New Zealand. You've added that cost on. You've just passed that straight through to your renter in higher rents. The same challenge has been with the bright line test as well. So we want to remove those costs that have been loaded onto landlords, because they just go straight through to renters, Anna.
Well, I mean, you talk about other businesses, but other businesses pay tax on their profits, and landlords don't pay tax on capital gains. So there's an argument to and fro, whichever way you look at it here. But if we look at rents in particular...
Sorry, you're mixing the drinks. That is economically incoherent, what you just said. Yeah.
You are comparing it to every other business and saying that landlords deserve the same sorts of benefits that we see in other sectors. But I'm asking you for the evidence that rents will actually be impacted this. Even last year, a Treasury report from the Housing Technical Working Group, August last year, said wage inflation and supply and demand were the two biggest drivers. They don't even mention that interest deductibility is going to have the impact that you are promising it will have, people.
Well, this is interesting as well, because what he's promising is downward pressure. Right, and like you say, Chewie, how much by when is what we want to know. No one's asked that question, I think, yet. But what he says is downward pressure. As we said last night, downward pressure doesn't necessarily mean anyone's going to reduce rent, because we talked about the equal and opposite can often be true. The equal and opposite from downward pressure is more profits, right? Equal and opposite from downward pressure on renters is more money for landlords. And people aren't going to throw that away. People aren't going to just say, oh, here, tenants, you guys can keep that $100 a week. Landlords are gonna make more money, like National were accusing supermarkets of taking GST off fresh fruit and veggies. Anything quickly, Chewie?
No, carry on.
It's one aspect of it, Anna. We have to grow the economy. We've inherited an economy where it's actually declined in growth in the last 3 of the last 4 quarters. There's lots of things we have to do to get the
Blame Labor.
Economy moving. This is one piece of it. The official advice we've received is to say that this will put downward pressure on rents, and that
official advice, when they like it, they'll use it. When official advice says you have an $800 million hole, I question your numbers. I question your numbers. Your numbers get questioned. Official advice, downward pressure. Official advice, downward pressure. Official advice, 800 million? No, not the case. Not the case. I don't see it. No.
It's self-evident. If you own a property and all of a sudden you can't do interest deductibility or you've got constraints around the bright line test, they are costs that you end up incurring. You end up either withdrawing your property and not putting it onto the market and making it available to renters, or you lift up rent prices. And that's just...
He just said so you'd withdraw the property. Now, he puts his foot in it. And look, gold, silver, bronze all goes to Anna Burns-France for this, because she comes to the conclusion that they might sell their house. And how is that a bad idea? If they're not going to rent it, maybe they'll sell it. Yep.
Everybody knows that a rental property that is sold disappears into dust like Thanos snapped his fucking fingers. That's just known. That's what the experts tell us.
Okay, please, cartoonists out there. I know there's a couple of you that watch. I want to see this freeze frame in purple snapping his fingers. That's what I want to see. BigHairyNews@gmail.com.
Essentially what's happened. Rents have gone up $170 a week.
Blame Labour.
And that's understandable. Costs have been added to landlords and therefore they pass those straight through to renters. That's why we've been saying for a long time, we posed it right from day one. We said it's a dumb idea. It's a stupid idea. Why would you add costs to landlords? And so we're finding a way to phase that back in.
Are you saying landlords would seriously have an empty house as opposed to renting it out? They wouldn't put it back on the market?
Yeah, why would you own a house? Why would you put money into owning a house if you actually and making it available to renters if you don't make a return on it? You know,
so it's
because you've added so much.
So rather than the 500-600,
yeah,
so you're just going to pay the mortgage rather than getting that. So in other words, let's say that your costs are $600 a week and you can get $500 a week rent for it under the Labor system. You're going to go, no, I'll just pay the full $600. It's not worth my time getting 90% of the money. I'm just not going to get it all. I honestly you can almost see, maybe we'll go back. You can almost see when his lips are moving and his brain kind of goes, where am I going with this?
I'm a multimillionaire and I don't know how interest rates work.
But honestly, you can see. I reckon you can see it and you can hear it. There's a moment where he kind of goes, hang on, what am I saying? Lips, what are you saying? Brain hasn't caught up quite with you yet.
And so we're finding a way to phase that back in.
Are you saying landlords...
Here it comes. No rush. Internet tonight, man.
Landlords would seriously have an empty house as opposed to renting it out?
What's the moment?
They wouldn't put it back on the market?
Yeah, why would you own a house? Why would you put money into owning a house if you actually and making it available to renters if you don't make a return on it? You know,
so it's
because
you've
added so much. Well, no, it's not going to sit empty, is it? We've got to make a landlord has to be able to make houses available in the rental market. If you actually add costs to them, it's less attractive for them to actually do that.
Sure, if they didn't
they
rent
might
it
sell
out,
the
what
house,
would they
Anna.
do?
They might sell the house.
And then someone owns a house. So that's okay, isn't it? Then someone owns a house.
But Anna, come on. Yeah, are you seriously saying to a rental person who cannot?
Anna, come on. You're trapping me. Anna, this is not how it works. You treat me better than this. Anna, come on, Anna. Don't do this to me, Anna. You're embarrassing me.
And then someone owns a house. So that's okay, isn't it? Then someone owns a house.
But Anna, come on. Yeah, are you seriously saying to a rental person who cannot afford a house that actually there's less supply of houses available for rent? We need to increase the supply of houses available for people to buy.
Fucking pause that. Are you saying, Anna Burns-Francis, that people that only have enough money to rent at New Zealand's very, very fair, very reasonable rental rates, they can't afford to buy a house because they can't save for a deposit because of the fucking rents that they're all paying, because we've cooked the market, all of us. And then when a landlord decides, I can't be fucked with this, I'm going to sell my house, when that renter turns up with the fucking 160,000 that they've managed to scrape together over the last 15 fucking years, and maybe they're in for a shot of buying it off the RV, and they turn up to the auction or they turn up to the open home to find themselves surrounded with people with 2, 3, 15, 25 houses and all the equity, and they can just fucking throw crazy money at it to have another house. And that person that scraped up to get the deposit finds out that it doesn't fucking matter. Back to the rental market, you scrubs. Work harder, get a better job. You suck. This man has never experienced this ever in his life. And this is what happens when you vote for these people that haven't lived a real life and haven't experienced the things that normal people experience. He's fucked off to another country. He's come back and run an airline. He's got all of these houses fucking rent debt free. He doesn't even have to worry about the fact that interest rates have gone up. It's good for him. Like, fuck this guy and fuck how out of touch these people are.
Mount Vesuvius just blew a top. Mount Machu Picchu just went off, didn't he, team? Yeah, he does actually then tell us all about how he's got no mortgage on any of his properties. He makes himself very, 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 very kind of average man today later in this conversation.
Do you think this man has ever gone into just a normal bank branch and talked to a normal loan officer to see what his debt to value ratio is? No. Or do you think he calls up his mates at a head office of a bank and gone, you know, cut me a deal?
Yeah.
Do you think he even has to do that? The level that he is working on is unrecognizable for the majority of this country.
Right, this has got about 20 seconds to go. Let's just get to the end of this part.
You're seriously saying to a rental person who cannot afford a house that actually there's less supply of houses available for rent. We need to increase the supply of houses available for people to buy. We need to increase the supply of houses available for people to rent. We need to increase the supply of houses available for social housing and state housing across this country. That is our major problem in the housing market that we have, is a lack of supply.
Chewy, we're going to move on to a third part of this conversation, because even though we've given Anna Burns-Francis some pretty big sort of props tonight, there was a couple of young fellas, you may know of them, they're on the internet, who had a bit of a chat about this last night. Let me play you this little clip from this, I don't know what this show's called, Two Gorgeous Guys or something like that, I'm not entirely sure. Particularly the last guy, I think there's only about a minute towards the end of it when we talk about what's going to happen from tomorrow with every journalist around the country. Have a listen. This is the party that was saying the reason that GST off fruit and veggies wouldn't work is that the supermarkets would not drop their value, they'd just make more profit. So why do they say it's going to happen to supermarkets, but all of a sudden landlords are going to be all altruistic and they're going to pass it on? Of course they're not. So a landlord can either make $100 a week or $180 a week. Oh, no, we'll just keep it at 100 and knock your rent back by $80. Of course they're not going to do it. It's fairy tale stuff, Chewy.
People in the chat that have rented or are currently renting, when ever have you received a rent reduction? Don't worry, I'll wait. I've rented most of my adult life and have never received a reduction in rent.
Yeah.
But I've been thankful that a landlord has kept the rent the same year on year.
Yep.
But I have never received a reduction of rent. And this is why this is fucking fantasy. That because they've got interest deductibility, they're suddenly going to wind back the rent. It's absolute bullshit fantasy. They could open it up to every renter in the country.
Yeah, it's pretty
There's
good,
not
actually.
going to be a single person that comes back and goes, oh yeah, my landlord did.
Yeah.
Absolute rubbish.
Unless the politicians do, because they're smart, because everyone knows that's going to be the first question in the next election cycle. How much did you reduce your rent by? So he should probably do that. And if he's got people watching this, they should probably tell him to do that. And I might have just given him an out, because obviously if it wasn't said to them, of course he's not going to reduce the rent of his, because then it becomes a better investment. Anyway, we should let him, actually now we should ignore everything we've just said, remove our brains and listen to how Luxon explains it. So last night, whoever those two young upstarts were talking about this, and one of the things that kind of bit older, bit less eruptive one said was, he is going to get asked how much he's reducing his rent for his rentals by, right? We said that last night. Someone's been watching, Chewy, because guess what was a question to him today?
Ooh.
Now, this is where he makes himself unrelatable on a scale you could not believe. I'll play it first. I like spoiling things, but I'll play it first.
Yeah, you've been on a tear of that tonight.
I have. Here we go.
It's going to make a difference to the rents that you charge your tenants for the properties that you own.
Look, ultimately, that's a decision for me personally, but no, this won't do. It won't make any impact for me at all.
You mean
Okay, yeah, but hang on. But this is the unrelatable bit. Why won't it make a difference, Chewy? Why won't it make a difference? It won't make a difference because he has no debt on any of his rentals. Because this is about interest deductibility. So he on one hand is saying it won't make a difference on mine because that's how wealthy and unattainable I am. And I also won't put any downward pressure on my rent. So basically he's saying I'm not going to reduce the rent on my tenants. I don't get the benefit of the deduction because I own them freehold. So it means I will still just charge them what they're being charged right now. The downward pressure that will come through the community will not be impacted, will not impact my tenants because I don't get the interest deductibility. So on one level, he's saying something that is almost impossible to think about. But on another level, he's also showing how his plan for downward pressure won't work for some properties.
it's going to make a difference to the rents that you charge your tenants for the properties that you own?
Look, ultimately, that's a decision for me personally, but no, this won't do. It won't make any impact for me at all.
Gap.
You mean you're still going to raise the rents? It's not going to put any downward pressure on the rents that you charge your tenants?
Well, sorry, no, what I mean is I don't have any mortgages, Anna. So this is about interest deductibility on mortgages for landlords. And I'm in a different situation. I'm very fortunate I don't have any mortgages.
Okay.
So relatable, our Prime Minister. I own 7 properties, 5 of them are rentals, and I have no mortgages. So very relatable. Go for it, Joe.
So hang on. Because if you draw a line there, it's like, oh yeah, if we reduce costs for these landlords, right, there'll be downward pressure on rent. So therefore, if you have no real major costs, you own your houses debt free, then people should be living there just for the costs of the building, like maybe your yearly rates and maintenance, right? There's no cost to the mortgage. Is that what we're talking, Luxon? No, fucking course not. We're talking about market forces where you will charge rent as high as the market will bear. The rent that you set has actually very little to do with your costs. Any real estate agent or property manager will constantly be putting pressure on you. If your rent is lower than what it is for the average of the area, your property manager will be telling you to put the rent up. Your accountant will be telling you to put the rent up. Why are you giving away this value for free when no one around you is? That is where rent comes from. Not the bright line test, not interest deductibility, not healthy home standard. They have a small short-term effect. But overall, it is market forces. And this government, the government of business and numbers, laughably, does not understand that. They're chipping away at the edges of a castle that they don't want to knock down.
The other thing that he misses, it's funny how he talks about, patronisingly talks to Anna Burns-Francis about her not sort of getting it. The reason he doesn't get it is that downward pressure implies rents across the whole area will go down. So let's say you've got a rental property in Brooklyn, in Wellington, right? Downward pressure means rent becomes cheaper. When it becomes cheaper, supply and demand, it will drive other rents down because all of a sudden the house next to you is $200 cheaper than this one. So why would I live here? I'll go there. So these ones have to reduce it. So he can't even figure out that if this theory that he's floating around would work, i.e. downward pressure, the rents in his freehold property would go down because you're not going to be able to rent them out at exorbitantly more than the ones in the neighborhood around you if that downward pressure was to work, which I don't believe it will. But he can't even go think. Okay, of course, if downward pressure comes to the neighborhood from my houses, then I would just, change my rents to whatever the market would dictate. He just goes, no, because mine are freehold. It's like he's not smart enough. I mean, he's obviously smart. He's done business and stuff and, he's done his things, but he's not smart enough and quick enough in the moment to not fumble over that and tell the whole of New Zealand that he is so wealthy that all of his rental properties have or that's not actually, can I tell you something? That's not even good business, Mr. Luxon. I know some property investors and what they typically tend to do is they get interest-only mortgages. And then the equity grows and they buy another one. And they put none of their money into the houses. And it's horrible, I know, but that's what smart investors do. So even what he's doing, telling us that, is showing us that he's got too many ivory back scratchers and he doesn't fucking know how to invest. That's what else it tells us, Chewy.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great because he said the thing. He's acknowledged what the problem is and how to fix it. We need to build more houses. That's the thing. But nobody's done it apart from the previous Labor government that got more houses built than ever before for decades. The previous national government sold off all of our social housing. And before that, when they had the chance to cut some red tape, we ended up with the leaky home scandal. So, it's the government needs to build more houses. They need to provide for people as they have done since World War II, since before World War II, actually. They need to do that. And they need to make sure that there is incentives for people that have money to invest in building new houses. We need to add housing stock to the market. That is the only thing that will really change market rents. And yes, and there needs to be an acknowledgement. They are not going down. We can build more houses. The rents are not going down. Yeah. But the more houses that get built, the more options that people have, then there is competition. It will hold rents at the same place for longer.
Yeah.
And that is part of inflation as well. We want to tackle inflation, right? Well, people's rents going up constantly. It's part of inflation. People having to pay more interest on their mortgage as part of inflation. This is such a big problem that nobody's got any fucking big ideas on how to change it, because making a big change is going to fuck off the real estate holding class in this country. And they're the ones that are making donations.